Hi guys, thanks for joining us. You're watching The Girls on SSP TV, whether you're watching us on YouTube or you're watching us on the website or on cable. Thanks for watching us, right?
All the devices.
Here we are.
Everywhere you go, there we are.
That's true.
So, what's going on, ladies?
Well, we just celebrated our daughter's sweet 16.
Are you that old?
I am that old. I am, yes. And now
Like
I really
it's gonna
feel
be
old.
17.
This is my granddaughter, so let's not talk about old.
Yes, we, in spite of everything going on in the world, we safely had a beautiful sweet 16. It was the Roaring 20s. She picked the perfect theme that we organized last year. We held it at Sand Springs. They did an excellent job for us, and I think everyone had a really good time. Everyone came in costume. We've got some really great photos of our family being all decked out, so it was fun.
Well, I know Mom took some photos with Dad, and you posted it for your anniversary, and you had like over 500 likes on the one picture. It was just crazy because people were so into the costume thing. So I said, we need to do this, and I don't know if people do this at home, but if you dress up and do like a theme for the holidays, maybe that's something we should do this year. Like pick
spice
a
it
theme,
up.
not just color theme, but like a theme. You know, and so that was, I had a really good time.
Well,
I was sore the next day. Aunt Nee can't hang like she used to.
And that wasn't from dancing, though. That was from the decorating.
Oh, the decorating was fun. Up and down the ladder, dealing with
wind.
the wind and the balloons. That was funny. But it was a great time being outside in the pavilion at Sand Springs because those kids, like it was just enough room. It was a nice breeze going by, so we lucked out with the weather.
We did. It really was perfect. Everything leading up to it, I was a bit nervous. We changed the date and had to, make some accommodations, but it all worked out perfectly. And, Bella made her grand entrance in the antique car that Jeff Fritz drove her in. So it really was a great event. I'm very happy. I'm happy it's over.
And all was said and done. Bella was happy.
Bella was happy. That's all that ever matters.
It was her sweet 16 party. It wasn't anybody else's concern.
Nope.
She had a great time, and so did we.
Yes.
Yeah, so the kids are getting so much bigger now. They're 17, 16, and 15, driving off to school themselves, and I'm like, tell me when they're home, because I get so nervous about the kids driving.
But you were mentioning this year with all the different changes with 2020. At this point, I think we're all just like numb to, okay, go with the flow because everything changes. Rules change per state or where you can go, when you have to wear your mask, and all this stuff that we are now, we have new rules, new guidelines. Kids have guidelines for school, we have guidelines for work. So we are going to be talking about that on the show today because we have our attorney with us. We have Alexis Falvello from the Falvello Law Firm, and she's going to talk about tips and things that we should really be aware about when it comes to COVID and dealing with that in the workplace, but also in our personal lives.
Right, all of our rights and the rights of, I have a father who's in an assisted living, and I'm trying to take care of him from afar without visitation per se. We have window visits and whatever, but there are some things that everybody should be aware of for every generation. So if you stay with us, when we come back, we're going to meet attorney Alexis Falvello. And if you have any questions, you can give them a call, you can check on their website, and we'll be right back.
Hey everyone, you're watching The Girls here on SSP TV. We are happy to have Alexis Falvello with us, attorney Alexis Falvello, I should say, of the Falvello Law Firm. And we're here to talk about anything legal when it deals with COVID. There's a lot of uncertainty, I'm sure. Alexis, thanks for joining us here on The Girls. I'm sure there's a lot of uncertainty around COVID as a whole as this unravels throughout the year.
Yeah, I think both from a legal perspective and a personal perspective. There's a lot of uncertainty that surrounds every single one of us because we're all affected by this.
Well, you grew up in a household surrounded by lawyers, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes over the years with all of the different laws that have been enacted. Things are getting stricter and stricter. People, sometimes they say they're like overly cautious with things, but when it comes to this, you're fourth generation lawyer?
I'm fourth generation lawyer.
Right,
yes.
so you had your dad
Yes.
Your grandpa and your great-grandpa.
That's correct.
So they're so proud that, to have the fourth generation
Yep.
come along. So you learned a thing or two along the way, didn't you?
Actually, I thought I'd be an attorney. Growing up, I was completely against it. But yeah, and I actually changed my mind when I was in college, and here I am, so.
How long have you guys been around, for people who may not know you in our viewing area?
So my great-grandfather was admitted to practice law in 1921. So we've been, and he came to the Hazleton area and practiced here. And his brother actually also became an attorney as well. I'm not sure when in the timeline, if he was before or after my great-grandfather, but he also was an attorney and practicing law in the Hazleton area, so.
Well, we're very familiar with your family because the Falvello Law Firm they've been representing the Lasan family for as long as I can remember,
Yeah.
and we're great friends with your family. So
Yep.
it's not just a professional thing, but it's personal as well. I know you since you're born, and you've
Yeah.
grown into a beautiful young
Oh,
lady,
thank
and
you.
you're very bright, and you're very active in our community.
Yes,
as
yeah.
well. So what are some of the things you do besides law?
Well, I'm on the United Charities Children's Home Board, which actually my great-grandfather, who became an attorney, was a resident there prior to going to college and then law school. And his siblings were as well. So his one brother who was an attorney as well, and his other brother was a resident there as well, and he became a dentist. So it's my understanding what they did was they worked while the other sibling was in school. While the other brother was in school, they worked. So, and my great-great-grandfather was a bricklayer. So there are some structures in the Hazleton area, you'll have to ask my grandmother or my father maybe, that he constructed. So, so there's a long history that I have with the Children's Home, and I'm the incoming president. I was nominated at our last meeting in August, so I'm on the board there.
Very nice.
And happy to do it, right? Because it does mean a lot to me, knowing that my great-grandfather was a resident there, but I also worked there as well, and that kind of ties into how I went to law school, because I wanted to be a voice for the kids that were there, because a lot of them have had issues of abuse and neglect, and the woman who was running the home at the time told me she, as a social worker, was the voice of these boys in court. So then I became a prosecutor as an attorney, and I did child abuse cases among other cases. So kind of all ties together with my history and where I'm at.
And now with the world that we live in with COVID, we wanted to have you on, and I know we were not going to talk about specific cases, but if we can
Yes.
talk about COVID, how it's affecting law and actual legalities that we might be
Right.
looking at in 2021, 2022.
Sure. So, well, I think that all depends, because this is developing almost daily, especially in the beginning. I can't tell you how many classes I took just to be updated on the law, because there were new laws, but they also expanded old laws, both for employers, but also from a liability standpoint for instance, nursing homes, and whether or not they should be held liable. And it's an interesting topic, because I think in the beginning, as physicians, it was a new virus that they're dealing with. So how to treat it, how to manage it, how to contain it, were all somewhat unknown. There are people in Congress who feel that liability should be restricted on behalf of medical professionals, for example. But I think as this virus develops and we learn more about it, there should be some accountability if there is a substandard care rendered to a potential patient. So, but again, it's developing and changing, and I think as far as 21 and 22, it would depend upon whether or not there is a vaccination for this virus, how available that vaccination is, who is it recommended to be at the top of the list to receive these vaccinations. There are so many different layers to this, and I think at this point a lot of them are unknown, and it will develop. So we'll just have to wait and see.
So we're in all uncharted waters, in other words, is what you're saying, and things could develop daily, and there's so many variables. You were talking about in nursing homes for the actual and assisted living for the residents.
Yes.
How about the employees? I mean, What are their rights? They have to go to work, they don't have to go to work. They wear a mask, will they lose their job? Will they not be able to collect? So what happens there when they have their own life to worry about and they have children at home, but yet they're going to be exposed to illness?
Right. So that's, again, a lot of layers to unpack there. And I think from an employee's perspective, they do have a responsibility to be proactive with respect to their everyday functioning while they're at work. Of course, mask wearing is mandated if they're in a nursing home, for example, or anywhere else, really, that's indoors. I also believe that washing your hands consistently is something that they should do. Having access to hand sanitizers is something that they should do. Trying not to gather socially around the water cooler, so to speak, in close quarters is something that would be frowned upon. But the employer also has an obligation as well. And I'm running a law firm, I'm an employer, and I understand the need to keep my employees safe. And there's an obligation, I think, for employers as well to make sure that those that they employ are safe, in addition to anybody that they welcome onto their business property. And I think, as far as workers' compensation claims, if the law, again, is subject to change, but at this point in time, if you're a claimant, if you're pursuing a claim, you have to establish that you did get it at work. And there are different ways you can do that. And it would be through testimony of other employees to see what, if any, measures were implicated and put in place to make sure that their employees are safe. So if I'm a factory worker and there is not a social distancing option on, and you're working in close quarters, or there's no separating devices between one employee to the next, these are all things that can be established through testimony of workers, supervisors, and even spouses of individuals. If I'm an employee and I go home and tell my husband, hey, I'm at work and they don't have any hand sanitizer available. The worker in the station next to me is right on top of me. These are things that you can do to establish, and then you can track COVID. And it was known that there were employees that had COVID in that particular factory, for instance. You can say, look, it's more likely than not that I contracted COVID while at work. But of course, then on the other side to it is you have to also take the necessary precautions in your everyday living as well, because there, of course, could be potential exposure outside of the workplace also. So.
All right, well, we're going to take a break right there. We have more to talk about with attorney Alexis Falvello. Stay with us. You're watching The Girls.
Welcome back, everyone. We're here with Alexis Falvello. She's the attorney at Falvello Law. Lexi, we were talking about the responsibilities of employers during COVID. Yes. But as an employee through the Coronavirus Response Act, what benefits do I get as an employee? I know, there's people now who are trying to deal with their child being at home for schooling, but they need to work. What benefit, now I might not be able to go to work. Is there something through that can help me? Or what if I don't feel safe at work? There's so many standards in place, but I think, I hear from friends of mine who are out every day working that, they're afraid to go into their workplace. Maybe they are doing everything that they have to, but there's still that fear. So what do we do not to lose our job, but feel safe?
So the Response Act, from what I understand, is for both private and nonprofits. Having said that, it does provide certain sick paid leave time for employees under certain circumstances. And there are certain qualifiers that get the employee to the place that they need to be in order to qualify for these benefits, so to speak, the paid sick time. With the Coronavirus Response Act, the paid sick leave does have limitations, and it does depend on if you're full-time or part-time. Of course, that's going to dictate what benefits you're eligible for and how long you're eligible for them. And the qualifying factors would be if you yourself have coronavirus, if you've been exposed to somebody who has coronavirus, and if you've been instructed by a family physician or a healthcare provider that says, look, you need to quarantine or self-isolate for a period of time, that would activate it. But another qualifying factor would be whether or not you have children and if those kids are able to go to school. And if they're not able to go to school because of the coronavirus, then you would be entitled, or you could be entitled, I should say, to these benefits. There's also the Family Medical Leave Act, and that was expanded, and that was for public employees. So that kind of is in the same spirit of the Coronavirus Response Act that was implemented, and where it gives public employees this sick paid time as well under certain qualifying factors. Of course, there are restrictions and limitations, and of course, the law is ever changing on this. Last I checked, both of these were in effect until the end of December 2019. Having said that, I think there's a strong possibility that could change depending on the circumstance and the need moving forward from the end of the year this year.
And just for clarification, December 2020, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Did I say 19?
Yeah. So we know that we're in 2020.
2020.
With the change of people maybe being diagnosed with COVID, but then they find out that they actually did not have COVID. I know there's some discrepancies of if someone actually did carry the virus, how does that, or can it affect how, if someone is collecting because they were, they couldn't work because of COVID, because they were directly impacted by it. So what does the law say? Does the law, if you were diagnosed as having COVID, but then you find out that you didn't have COVID,
right?
Like what are the guidelines for that? Or do you just go to that point and say, I was told I had COVID up to this point,
right?
And now obviously I'm able to work because they told me that my test was negative.
Right. I think if they're collecting unemployment because of anything COVID related, and it was contracted outside the workforce, that certainly if it was a false negative or a false positive test, that they would still be entitled to those benefits. For reasons that were completely beyond their control, and I'm hearing that there are a lot of false positive tests. So I would think that they would still be entitled to those benefits.
What are you seeing in your office as far as what are people calling and what are their main concerns when they're dealing with COVID?
So we've been getting a lot of calls for wills and powers of attorney, okay? And I'm fourth generation attorney in my family, and I'm also within our family, my mom was diagnosed with cancer a few years ago and didn't have that paperwork in place, and it was needed. People don't like to think about it, but it is good to have powers of attorney, both from a financial standpoint, a healthcare standpoint as well, and depending on the type of power you'd like to relinquish to your agent or your attorney in fact. You can have a general power of attorney financially, where your named agent can act on your behalf at any point in time, regardless of your medical condition, or you can have one that's contingent upon incapacitation, wherein those powers are effective only upon your incapacitation.
And that's different than a living will. That's a separate...
Well, a healthcare power of attorney, we have attached to it a healthcare directive, which is a living will. So the healthcare power of attorney allows you to name somebody as your agent to make decisions for you only in the event of your incapacitation. And of course, attached to that would be the healthcare directive, because that's going to give your loved one direction on how your loved one is handling on your behalf your last wishes.
So getting a lot of those calls, the COVID virus sort of like woke everybody up and thought, geez, look at this pandemic. We never would have dreamed it was going to happen. We never would have dreamed, like we were just saying it like for a week or two, were you dreaming this? Is this going to go away? We had never dealt with anything like this. So I think after everybody realized that it wasn't going away and it was only going to be something that we had to deal with for a long, long time, and we don't know how long it's going to last, you really have to get your act together with you.
Well,
it's going to take care of your kids if you should be incapacitated. And
it's
what are
the way
the things we have to do? Yeah, exactly.
I think so. I think people are thinking about their own mortality.
Yeah,
for
the
sure.
urgency of it.
Right, and perhaps people have been, most of the calls we get, my husband and I, we've been meaning to do this, we've just been putting it off,
Yes.
and this kind of lit a fire, for them to come in, make the appointment, and and have the paperwork put in place.
Well, you always do a good job with being so thorough with all of your paperwork. You always double check, and even coming on the show, you said, let me make sure, you did your research and you've actually been taking classes, correct?
Yes, yeah.
And studying the law on COVID because it's so new.
Right. And as an employer, I have an obligation to help those. And, and litigation is what we do in our law practice, is the majority of what we do in the practice. So, we have an obligation, obviously, to potential clients who come through the door as well.
And you're going to bring up things, if we do have a question and call you about anything, you have other avenues that we never would think of. Was this covered, was that covered? So there are so many things that if anybody has a question out there, if you own a business, you're worried about your employees, if you work somewhere and you're worried about your safety, they could give you a call and set up some type of just a consultation, even to find out if they, to go to work safely and make sure everything's being covered, because as we say, every day it's changing.
Yes, yeah. In law school, everybody used to joke that, if a certain fact scenario existed, then legally what are your options or what would the outcome be? And we always joked, it depends, really, because the law can be so fact specific. And particularly now with this virus and the law changing.
So it would be case by case. So if someone at home is watching the show and they do have a concern about something pertaining to COVID, maybe it's not something that we mentioned, maybe it's more specific, that would be something that they would need to talk to their attorney about.
Mm-hmm. And we're happy to speak to anybody who has questions. Consultations are free initially. And I understand that people can be afraid, but also, want to make sure that they're taken care of as well.
And so with COVID, do you have that in place in your office, or do you meet someone in their home? Do you do home visits? Do you go to nursing homes? How are you handling out that? Because I know we had an instance where we needed you and you were able to go, when it was allowed, into the actual facility and be able to take care of the person's will and whatever that needed to be done and all the legal papers.
Mm-hmm. A lot of that does depend on the facility that somebody's located in. We're happy to do what the client is comfortable doing as well. So if you're not in an assisted living or nursing home community, we're happy to meet people in the parking lot to notarize and witness paperwork if need be. Anybody who comes into our office, we do require that they wear a mask, and I will be masked as well when I meet clients. We do phone conferences. We do go to people's homes, although I don't know that I have been since this virus kind of took hold in March. But we try to be as accommodating as possible to our clients, especially under these circumstances.
And your mom's doing well now?
She's doing well, yeah.
Family's doing well?
How about your grandma?
Yeah,
family is very involved in the community?
Well. Yeah, I called my grandmother because she's in an assisted living community, and I was on the phone with her for a half hour about how to can tomatoes and stuff peppers and make zucchini bread. And
she's how old?
All of that. She's 91.
91 now, and she remembers all of that stuff.
She does. She's a bit all over the place, but she always was a bit all over the place.
She's a fabulous cook too, and I need her chocolate cake recipe because I lost it. So
you know what? I'm making it this weekend.
Oh, well, we're coming over.
Yeah.
Lexi, thanks. I always say Lexi because you're like family in us, but Attorney Falvello on The Girls with Us, talking about issues, legality issues that deal with COVID. If you have any questions, you can certainly call her office for a free consultation.
Yep, and we will. So I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you're staying safe, and we'll see you next time on The Girls.